Kutztown University Student Government, Kutztown University Student Services Incorporated, KUR staff and management, or other affiliated organizations.
I'm Steve Majiri, host of KU Live. Tune in every Tuesdays at 2 p.m. for all things Kutztown University. We will discuss everything ranging from school news, sports, and upcoming events, along with frequent appearances from student government to discuss new policies. We will also have members of ACE, the Association of Campus Events, to come in weekly to discuss what new activities are coming to the university. Tune in to 1670 AM or listen to us online at www.kutztown.edu/KUR or on your smartphone by downloading the TuneIn app. You can also listen to us via any phone by calling 610-465-7860. KUR, the radio voice of Kutztown University. KUR, the radio voice of Kutztown University. KUR Kutztown. Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of KU Live. The time right now is about 2:03 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm your host, Steve Majiri, and we have an excellent show today. We've got our friends from WEU will let us borrow our friend Nick Lawrence to come in, and we've also got a great topic to speak about, an issue that's sort of been, fallen under the pile and is almost forgotten about, is the issue of the gun laws on campus. And I came across an article in one of my classes, my journalism lab class. Thank you to Dr. Downing for this. Really clutch. I ended up finding an article on the Chronicle of Higher Education, a website, and the article is called Why I Don't Want Guns in My Classroom. And it's basically a written manifestation of his beliefs on the policy and whether he thinks if they're conducive or not to a good academic setting. And I have the author of that, who is a Kutztown University professor of professional writing and English here, Professor Jeffrey Vicola, on the show. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's an honor to have you, and we appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. Now, this has drawn a lot of traffic. A lot of people on campus have been talking about it. You can look on the article itself online. It's driven a lot of comments. I'm just curious, what inspired you ultimately to write the article?
I think this is an issue that we should be at least discussing. I noticed that a lot of people were not aware of the change in policy, or some of them thought that it was something other than what it actually is. And so when I talk with students and other faculty about this, they're surprised to find out that people can now carry a concealed weapon onto campus without permission, and that they can get permission to carry them in a building if that permission is granted. I simply feel that it changes the environment, a learning environment, and it greatly affects learning itself. So I thought it was a worthwhile topic to at least discuss.
Right, that's a great point to bring up. It's about just getting people to talk about it. That's the first step in fixing it. And also, I forgot to introduce our friend Nick Lawrence is on the show. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steve. It's good to be with you guys.
Great to have you. All right, so what do you think about this? Do you agree with the whole gun policy on campus?
You're talking to me?
Yes.
I think, well, first we have to go by the laws of the state. That's the first thing. So they're going to be in harmony with the laws of the state. But I was thinking as you guys were talking there, does the university have any rules or any standards beyond what the state says? And if a person has been approved by the state to be able to carry a concealed weapon, what kind of background does the university do? Any type of a background check? Just because the state allowed it, does it mean that the university has to allow it, or did they do any checks beyond that? I don't know the answer to that, Steve. That's what I'm sure maybe Dr. Vicola knows the answer to that.
I do not know the answer to that.
That's a good question.
The policy itself is pretty vague when you read it, and as far as I know, there are no other standards beyond what is said in that policy.
So basically, they approve anybody who's been approved to carrying a concealed weapon. They approve that for campus then?
That's
yes,
correct.
That's correct.
Wow.
And the language they use, they say, and this is from the article itself, it says, under the same policy, anyone who has, quote, compelling personal safety concerns can request permission from campus police to bring a gun onto, quote, university property. And he says right here, and verbatim, but the term university property refers to buildings. Therefore, any person who has obtained permission can legally bring a gun into a building, even the classroom. And something, please go ahead.
Yeah, let me just clarify that legally, someone can bring a gun onto state property. Which is the campus itself.
Right,
they would need
permission
to bring it into a building. Yes.
Right, because thank you for clarifying that. Yeah. It's state property. Okay, and another issue that we have to just ask is that we've kind of answered it. for the sake of asking, what is the biggest flaw you see in the university ordinance regarding guns on campus?
Well, I think this opens the door and increases the likelihood that something can happen. If people are allowed to have a concealed weapon on campus, you have to look in the long term and try to figure out what could happen down the road if this becomes commonplace, where people are continually bringing guns onto campus. What if someone forgets it in their bag and brings it into a building? How do we address that? If someone feels that they are threatened and they don't have time to go and get permission to carry a weapon, would they take it upon themselves to do that? If there's a campus event where people are involved in some kind of demonstration or protest and tensions get high, tensions arise as a result of that, will people start acting out of emotion? Will that create a more dangerous situation? It just seems to me that no one has really thought about the long-term implications of this policy change.
Yeah, it's almost like a law of averages. When there's smoke, there's fire. You know, you take away guns, there's guaranteed to be a lower percentage of any kind of violence regarding that on campus, and an overall safer feeling. And one thing you've brought up is that it's a common argument. Not many gun owners, not many students, but just gun owners in general are trained in dealing with high-stress situations in law enforcement.
Right.
And with this in mind, do you believe this is the reason why the state system of higher education would mandate this new policy?
I can't speak to that. My feeling is that that they're being honest and saying that they were afraid of lawsuits. So that being a state campus, there was the fear that someone could sue and say that their Second Amendment rights were infringed upon because it's state property and they should be allowed to bring it there. So they were afraid of money. They were afraid of a lawsuit. But Dr. Cevallos, when he made this change, announced himself, and this was published in the newspapers as well, that he didn't agree with allowing guns on campus. Yet he made that change regardless because he was afraid of this lawsuit. And a lawsuit to me is not a reason to make such a dramatic change and to possibly endanger your students.
Right. You should defend your position. You know, the lawsuits, if you win, then it's fine. And I think maybe he was just worried because of the budget concerns, but that's a whole separate issue. And it's been passed. But the strange fact that I found out is that only 4 state universities allow this. I don't know the other 3, but we're supposed to be all in unison, a whole state system of higher education, yet only a quarter of us are allowed. That just it's a little confusing. Nick, what do you think of that, of them only mandating it in 4 universities?
Well, it doesn't make any sense. If they're all part of the state system, they probably should be consistent across the board. I mean, as you guys are talking, I'm thinking about the definition of a concealed weapon. Is that specifically a handgun? I mean, you could conceal something else, just as it was in the Columbine incident when they concealed those rifles underneath their long trench coats. Does concealed weapon mean just a handgun? That's one concept. And the other thing was, the argument is that we shouldn't deny law-abiding citizens the right to bear arms from the Constitution. But everybody's law-abiding until they break the law, and then they're no longer law-abiding. So what do you do with that? What does that actually? What do those terms mean? What do you guys think about that?
Right. It's just more of the ambiguous language that can be taken in multiple ways by people. Because a concealed weapon. Someone who's a bigger person gets a sawed-off shotgun and wears thick jackets, they can hide it in there. It won't show up. A bigger handgun to some people might be considered smaller to some people, and it's easier to conceal. It's just across the board. There's a lot of issues surrounding this, and I feel they need to banish the gray lines and make this clear language on what is allowed and what isn't allowed. And as it says, it allows another issue with this, I believe, is that the law allows open carry on university grounds, which is state property, but not in university buildings. However, there's no way to patrol or monitor whether armed or unarmed people enter university buildings. Like Mike, my producer, said, there's no gun rack for you to hang up your gun and go to class. Or there's no metal detector. What do you think about this, Professor Vacola?
I think that having the very idea of possibly having a gun in the classroom is not only dangerous but very disruptive. I wonder, again, what the long-term ramifications of this will be. Will they be more apprehensive to speak their minds if in the back of their mind they know that someone could be carrying a weapon. It doesn't mean that they're afraid they're going to be shot necessarily, but it changes the atmosphere itself. And you had mentioned earlier the reaction to the article online, and a lot of those people that were making points online, and I love to have a discussion about this, but they are part of the argument that I'm making, because what you find are a lot of personal attacks on me, people who are so attached to their beliefs and their ideology that they lose control of their own emotions, even on email. And the same thing happens in the classroom when students are challenged. No one likes to have their ideas challenged. And so it's difficult to have a productive conversation when if people are going to threaten one another, obviously. But add to that the possibility that someone could have a gun in there, and does this shut down the conversation altogether? Do people start voicing their views less frequently simply because there may be a gun on campus or in the classroom? I mean, I think that's something that we have to consider.
Right, and you say in the article that you encourage, just discussion, and it says, I'm quoting, as a writing professor, part of my job is to teach students how to make an effective argument. You read essays and contentious issues, and you say you play devil's advocate. You present the opposing argument to get them to see the issue from every perspective. And that's great. That's critical thinking. That's something we all should have, because what makes you really a better thinker in that mind is to look at it from both perspectives. And you're thinking what the point here is I believe it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if in the article is that if people have in the back of their mind this person, has a weapon on them, they may be a little more, feel a little more authoritative, and it brings a sense of possible violence in there if you question my beliefs on something like that. And I'm not insinuating by any means that means this person is going to threaten you with a weapon because of that. But it's just in the back of your mind, you think this person, maybe I shouldn't, play devil's advocate or just, question or just his views because of that.
It also creates the situation where even if the person isn't carrying a gun, if that possibility is present and someone does kind of have a meltdown during a debate, someone loses control of their emotions a little bit, will other people in the classroom think that, well, this person could have a gun, maybe I should shut up now? Again, that interferes with the learning process, and I think we shouldn't have that obstacle in the classroom.
I agree. But I don't see how guns and education mix. It just either way it makes it seems like a less safe environment, because you have university police there. They're monitoring everything. They do a good job of keeping an eye on us. Why do we need to have weapons on campus? We're not trying to be vigilantes here. We're paying thousands of dollars to get an education. And it just is. There's a lot of issues across the board with this. And one thing that I wanted to say, I remember when I read this, I saw one professor agreed with you, and I wish I could find his comment, but there are so many of them. It's been buried by it, but. And yeah, there's one 4 days ago. So what the man said was, and I'm just paraphrasing, he said that he has you as a professor of in a state system, and I don't know which school, but they allow concealed carry on campus. And there was a time when he was in a classroom and his student had his weapon out, and it was a revolver, and he was, I don't know, playing with the barrel or something, or the cylinder, and spinning it or something. And he was so uncomfortable by that he just walked up and left. Mm-hmm. And that's just something that may happen. Someone may think, all right, wait, let me just adjust this, and all of a sudden, accidental discharge, something like that. I'm not saying that, is possible. It just is, it's just throwing it out there, because that's, either way, my point is I don't see how guns and education mix. There's a reason why that, a lot of are so strict, because they cause so much death in this country. And I don't know why students would go to a university saying, I want to learn, but I'm also going to keep my weapon with me. What do you think on that, Nick?
Well, I think what you guys are saying is really perfect. I mean, given the environment we find ourselves in today, the political environment, just take that one aspect of society and how all the polls and surveys show that we are more polarized today than we've ever been. And people are adamant in there, and they have strong feelings either about the president, against him, for him, or whatever. And, people running for office, it does lend another level of let's say, energy to the classroom. Now, if you know that there's somebody carrying a gun, I was thinking even about the arming professors and teachers. Across the country, there are school districts saying that their teachers can carry guns, concealed weapons, and things like that. So what does that do? What kind of energy does that raise in the classroom if a student thinks that a professor has a gun? Now, most people, we're not thinking a professor is going to snap out. You're not even thinking that other students are going to snap out. But when you get to these political discussions and arguments and things like that, there is a lot of energy there, and there's a lot of anger there, and there's a lot of enmity, and somebody could just reach for something because you hear the term today everybody uses, well, he disrespected me. Whatever that word means, people
Right.
act on those things, don't they?
Right.
And as a result of that, people can become unstable. Stable people can become unstable in any given circumstance, because people know that most crimes of murder are crimes of emotion. It's not something that they've premeditated, but if you have the opportunity and you have the weapon with you,
It's impulsive.
it's an impulse. Sure,
Yes.
exactly,
Yes.
Steve. Great stuff.
The angry man opens his eyes and shuts his ears, or opens his mouth and shuts his ears.
Yeah.
That's the old expression, and that's something that guns aren't going to help with that. And just moving on to our next question, you look at how universities are created to design a friendly atmosphere that really encourages students to look into a situation from every perspective. We've sort of discussed about this, but just to put a lid on that, how do you believe guns can tamper this?
I'm sorry, say it again.
I'm sorry.
Temper.
Like you say that you're right, how universities are designed to create a friendly atmosphere that encourages students to look at a situation from every perspective, like we've been talking about. Just to put a lid on this part of the discussion, how do you believe ultimately guns on campus can temper this?
Okay.
Temper this.
I don't know that universities have to have a friendly atmosphere. I just think that they should have a safe atmosphere.
Much better term.
A comfortable atmosphere. And like I'd been saying, I think that having these guns and knowing that they're around changes how we think and how we feel about our own personal safety. And the last thing that we want in a university is for people to feel like they shouldn't speak their minds. This is where we should do that. This is the environment where we should speak up and maybe challenge ideas and put forth new ideas, not necessarily because they're going to be the right ideas, but because
It makes you think.
yeah, it makes us think, and it challenges the way we've done things, and it solves problems. And if people are reluctant to do that, then the university isn't as effective as it should be, I think.
I agree. And like you say, it's just supposed to look at it from multiple perspectives. What do you believe would be the solution to this whole gun issue on campus? Kind of a big question.
Yeah, well, I can make it very simple. I think that the policy should be reversed to what it was. I think that no weapons should be allowed on campus under any circumstances. I trust law enforcement. I trust campus police to protect the environment. And I see no reason why we should change that. If there's a need for more campus police, perhaps we should have that discussion as well.
Right. I don't think we have enough. I think it's I may be wrong on this, but I think I've heard of something around 14 are usually patrolling, and that's a fair amount. I may be wrong on that, as I said, but it's a large campus and a lot of buildings. Is one guy really enough to stop all of this? I just think that either you get more university police or you get rid of the gun laws. I think that's the way we should look at it, because I just don't know why students should carry the guns to defend themselves. If you have trained law enforcement who are trained on how to handle high-stress situations, then that might be better. I mean, for all we know, and we'll bring up another point in your article, you see right here one instance, and I should have opened up the hyperlink. An activist group came to campus once unannounced and shouted, and I think I saw them, shouting at passing students with bullhorns, accusing them of being sinners and, quote, fornicators.
Yes.
And I saw Catholics, I believe, something like that. Maybe
Christians.
Christians, yes. Thank you, the Christians. And you see that's just directly, attacking, not questioning, attacking students' beliefs, saying you are, a sinner and all of that. And to the wrong person, this is a bunch of, what-if situation. But with the wrong person, that could end up in a really violent and confrontational situation.
Yeah, the incident I'm referring to is actually the same group that you probably saw before, Stephen. However, about 7, maybe even 8 years ago was the first time they came to campus unannounced, and no one was prepared for it. Faculty, administration, no one had any idea this was going to happen, and the students certainly weren't prepared for it. And they responded by getting very upset and very emotional and screaming back at these protesters. And there were a few people who were arrested. There were a few young men who were arrested because they couldn't control themselves. And again, if we had weapons on campus, if people were carrying guns at the time, could someone have lost control of their emotions and started shooting people? Could they have at least threatened another person? Even that would be something that I think would be frightening.
Right, and it would just exacerbate the entire situation because, Nick, like we'll just also bring you into this, how we discussed, the Second Amendment, and that's a very older law, and that's what they say, oh, well, the student should have the right, to bear arms, and I don't know if that applies to, defending your beliefs, but just what we really talked about is how the people that often perpetuate this, it's the people at the NRA, and we all know those infamous words by Wayne LaPierre. The only thing stopping a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. But that's what some students may think. And I'll say this: follow his logic there. Okay, so if there's a shooting at a school, then all of a sudden, in a classroom, professors should be, if they had a gun, they wouldn't, stop that. If there's a shooting at a preschool, then the teachers around really impressionable, practically infants need guns, and there's going to be guns everywhere. It's just something that we don't really need them, as many of them as we do in this society, and especially college campuses. That's not where we're going here.
If I could make one other point.
Please do.
Just a couple of weeks ago, there's a woman named Anita Sarkeesian who brought up the topic of how women are portrayed in video games. And she wanted to have this discussion at Utah State University. So she planned an event where she would talk about this issue of how women were portrayed in video games.
Does this apply towards It does? Okay.
Yeah, and so they received so many threats just because this event was going to take place. They had numerous people saying they were going to come in with guns and shoot up the place. It was going to be the biggest massacre in history.
Wow.
And as a result, they canceled the event. And this is something that I think is happening all the time, that we have a small vocal minority who are dictating what we talk about. Essentially, they're shutting down conversations because they're saying, if you even have this discussion, I will shoot you, I will hurt you. And what we're finding is people are going along with that. To me, this is terrorism in its purest form.
It fits right into the parameters of it.
It does.
Threats. It's, and it's the reason why we're, this is America. It doesn't make sense how someone would say, you can't say this. And that's another thing I wanted to bring in. Nick and I would like to hear your thoughts on this. I feel like sometimes the First Amendment and the Second Amendment sort of conflict with each other. All right, well, I have freedom of speech. I'm like, yeah, but I have freedom to bear arms. Mm-hmm. Someone may take that wrong. Think if you, want to purge your free speech on me, I'll, bring out my right to bear arms. Do you think that might? Do you believe in any way they may conflict each other, Nick?
We've expanded the definition of the right to bear arms as well as what free speech is, right? And so sometimes I think they do overlap, just like people believe that money is speech. With the political decision, we look at money now as speech. Citizens United ruling being an example of that. So we blend these things a lot of times, and that's part of the problem. The real thing is this: the Constitution, the Second Amendment of the Constitution, gives the people the right to bear arms. Well, the problem with that is that both outcomes are possible. In other words, there have been circumstances where people having a gun prevented any worse killing, but there are other times when, because people did not have a gun, it was a lot worse. So you people can see both outcomes, Steve, and it's the hard thing to decide, because both of them can actually can work. Some people feel safe when there are guns around. Other people feel unsafe because there are guns around. So it's not an easy thing to decide. So, Steve, let's open the phone lines and let's see if people want to give us a call, and give out those contact numbers. I'll give that that contact number to get people to call, because we need to hear what other people listening to the show actually think about this.
Right. We'll keep Professor Vacol on for a little longer. We'll just, this is something I really would love to hear everyone's thoughts on. This is a big topic, and it's been brought back into, prominence now. So the number for us is 610-683-4859. That is 610-683-4859. I want to hear from anybody, whether you live in town, because 54%, more than half of our students live off campus and in town, and probably within a close proximity of people who live in town here, the full-time residents. And then we have, the rest living on campus. 9,000 and something students go here. And what would you think? What would you think? Would you feel safer if you had, younger people carrying weapons around, just even in town? Do you think we need more of them? And from students, what do you think? Do you agree? Do you think we should have weapons here? Do you think we shouldn't? With the recent, with what we've had with armed robberies on campus and off campus as well, do you think there should be some presence of weapons for self-defense on campus? That's something I'd love to hear.
So, Steve, one of the most, the most powerful motivations for change in any way is fear. Right? I mean, this whole thing is about fear. Fear that either somebody's going to kill you unexpectedly, therefore we need to carry guns. Or fear that because people have guns, they're going to kill you. So, either way, it's the motivation of fear. And different groups capitalize on that fear factor, in a sense, as to what they push on these things. I think Dr. Vocolo's point is true, that the smallest minorities, like the old expression, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, is the smallest minorities carry the biggest sticks on campus as well as in society, because we have to deal with those kinds of people. So, Dr. Vocolo, what do you think about that?
I agree. I think that the discussion has to be had, and I don't think there are going to be any easy answers to this. I do wish more people would speak up about it, though.
That's what I'd love to hear from anyone here. Just real quickly, 610-683-4859. Anything you'd like to say, please call in. We'd love to hear you. I'm sorry, please continue.
Sure. And I think some people, and I understand this, are intimidated by the conversation itself. They don't want to get into the mix, because then you get a lot of back and forth. You do get people on both sides.
More fiery arguments. Yeah.
Losing control a little bit, maybe getting angry, having personal attacks, and people understandably don't want to get involved in that. But I think it's crucial that we do have that conversation with everyone, with students, their parents, who are in many cases paying for their education. Why weren't, I talked to a lot of students, and one of the questions that they kept bringing up was, why weren't we informed about this? Why didn't anybody ask us how we felt, because this is our campus, before the decision was made?
Exactly. And I remember when the news first broke, in wake of all that, a lot of students were asked, and a lot of them were outraged by it. They're thinking, oh, so now I'm going to a campus where I may be bumping into somebody, and he looks at me the wrong way, and all of a sudden I've got a gun. I'm looking down a gun barrel, and that's still only a small possibility, but it's just the thought of it is completely, it goes against the grain of what we believe is not really, it's safe in a sense, but also what's the word I'm looking for? Like a acceptable community, and where we're here to learn, and we're paying thousands of dollars to go here. And one more thing I remember Nick brought up is it's the element of fear. That's what a lot of people, and it's incited a lot of that in some people, because they're fear. All right, well, what's going on campus? And as a professor, and has this policy had any really damaging effect on you, as from a fear standpoint, and in the past year of its existence?
No, it hasn't. I'm not going to change my approach to teaching because of a change in policy. I am perhaps a bit more conscious of the safety of the classroom. If I had seen someone with a weapon, if I had any reason to believe that someone had a weapon, I'd dismiss class immediately. So I am a bit more aware, probably, than I had been. It's been on my mind a bit more than it had been in the past. But I think that's going to increase for everyone the longer this policy stays in effect. I think people will be more conscious of the fact that there could be a gun on campus.
Yeah, it's all the possibility of if there's a gun on campus, or guns around campus. So just again, I'd like to hear everyone's thoughts. Feel free to call in. We appreciate your beliefs here. 610-683-4859. That is 610-683-4859.
Steve, let me support what Dr. Vocolo had to say there. In a show that I did last week with one of my shows I interviewed teenagers on called Radio Voices, and we were talking about the shooting that took place in the school in Washington State. Mm-hmm. And I asked, there were 4 kids on the panel from 4 different high schools. And I asked them, do you think about security in your school? 3 of the 4 said that they do. One of them said, well, no, I'm in a small school district. We've never had anything happen like this, and so we don't think of it. But 3 of the other kids who were bigger schools in Berks County, they all admitted that every day they think of the possibility that somebody could snap out in school, somebody could come onto the campus and do something, And I think if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to keep getting the same results, right? In other words, we have our heads stuck in the sand until something actually happens, and then it's too late after the fact. If somebody shoots someone or gets killed or whatever, then we get all upset and we say, well, why didn't we do it? Why didn't we know?
We could have prevented it.
We just don't. We don't do preventive maintenance on our cars. We don't do preventive maintenance on our bodies, and apparently we're not doing preventive maintenance with our students and our kids as well.
You can't retroactively fix someone getting shot or even killed.
Exactly.
And that's with guns. It's such a really slippery slope because there's a law saying you can have guns, but then there's also laws where you also say you can't have them here, only in certain places. But this law as a student, I have been very uneasy about it. My parents were very, upset about it and didn't feel comfortable sending me here. But I told them, this is where I'm going. I like it here, and it's just something that I'm really glad we get to speak about. And Professor Vocolo, we really appreciate your input. How much more time do you have?
I'm okay.
Okay, well, hey, we'll continue the discussion. This is something that I'm glad it's finally back into the fold. We are discussing, the policy. Do you agree with it? Do you think that there should still be guns on campus? Just feel free to give us a call at 610-683-4859. That's 610-683-4859.
Steve, what do you and Dr. Vocolo think about the overall idea of the violent society we live in as part of a contributing factor to even dealing with this issue? I mean, most people would agree that there's a lot of violence in our society, and kids starting young are watching all of these things, starting with some of the violent video games. Yet a lot of people will say those things don't have an effect. What's your take on that? Steve, what's your take on it, and then Dr. Vocolo's take on it as well?
Yeah, I think that, do you mean from what video games do, or just from what weapons?
Everything from the violence in society, which causes people to be afraid. It also causes people to act out more violently. Does the media, do video games, does any of that stuff have any influence? I don't think we're not an island. We're not separate from the rest of the world in a way.
We're not, and I believe that they almost perpetuate it because they need to make their buck, but they just do it in such a wrong and unethical way because. There are video games out there that kids who are too young and way too impressionable have, and they look at someone holding a gun as just a symbol of power and it's cool and all that, and they could, some may expose themselves to it, some may have grown up around it and can't control it, but then it just leads to, all right, then this person feels they need to have it, and then all of a sudden they feel, oh, well, in this game, this person used the gun to defend themselves when his beliefs were questioned, and then all of a sudden, here they are at a university and something like that happens. Again, another huge what-ifs scenario, but it just is a really slippery slope. And then what do you think, Professor Vocolo? Do you believe the media sort of perpetuates this?
I'm not one to believe that things like video games or movies are what cause us to be violent. I don't see any change historically in people becoming more or less violent. But I do think we have much more access to weapons nowadays, especially handguns, concealed weapons, than ever before. And because of that, it's become kind of commonplace. I also think that we have generations growing up who are used to it even from kindergarten now, used to being in an environment where things happen, unfortunately, at these schools. And that scares me a little because I know that some schools go into lockdown for various reasons. They have a policy to keep students safe, where if anything happens, if there's a fight at a high school, let's say, if there's a fight, if a student becomes out of control, they tell everyone in the university that they're on lockdown and no one can leave the classrooms. And the students are getting used to this. This is something that's occurring more and more often. And I wonder what that means. I wonder if we're just going to get used to the fact that we could be in danger simply by going to school, and that it becomes commonplace, and we accept that. I hope that's not the case.
Right. Guns have become so much a horrible influence on some kids. In some high schools, if you go to Center City, schools really, worn out, schools that get very little funding, they have police officers who have metal detectors in there. They will search you from head to toe to make sure you have no guns on you. And that, even if there are no guns, just by principle, the thought of, all right, guns, they're looking at just that word itself, it will send fear throughout everyone's minds about that. And that just it doesn't mix with education. And I'm also just bring another article I have here that I think was linked on his Professor Vocola's article. It's an editorial by I believe the Lehigh Valley Live, and it says, quite simple, on the policy, quote, "This is crazy. If administrators want to continue to ban guns on campuses with security departments having storage of student guns for sport shooting, competition, and hunting, as is the current policy, they should be allowed to do so." And it holds true. What are your thoughts on this, Nick?
Well, my mind was thinking about something else while you were asking that question, Steve. So, But I agree with what you're talking about there. I was thinking just about the physical structure of classrooms. I don't know what it's like on a college campus, but in high schools, they have one door in, and it's the same door out. So, and the policies at high schools are telling kids that they should turn the lights out, the teachers turn the lights out in the classroom if there's a problem, and go into the corner. So, okay, but there's no escape route other than the same door that let's say a would-be gunman can come in. I don't know if it's like that on college campuses or not. And
right.
It is.
It is in a lot of our classrooms.
The physical structure of the way we build these classrooms is not in tune with what's going on in contemporary society. And the other thing I want to bring back before I let this thought go, video games and movies. The difference between those kinds of things today and it was, let's say, 30, 40 years ago is the repetitive nature of stuff.
Yes.
The more often you experience any feeling and emotion, something you visualize or picture, any language teacher knows that the more repetition you do, the greater chance that student's going to learn the language. So today, you keep going on a game until you succeed, until you killed enough people. Or if you want to watch a movie, you have to do is DVR it or repeat it as often as you'd like to. Well, that's the difference in society today compared to things in the past. You might have seen a movie one time in the past, or you might have played a game one time, but today it's repetitive upon repetition. I think that stuff sits in the unconscious mind and could come out at a time when we don't want it to come out.
Yeah, it's very unconscious because that's something that we watch this, we say, oh, I want to go see this Michael Bay movie with explosions and violence and all that. Or you say, I want to get this new video game like Call of Duty, where the objective, no matter what you say, all the buttons you push, you're walking down a hallway and killing everyone there. You say, oh, but I would never do this in real life. Then why would you do it in your subconscious? And that's just what it's polarizing. I'll admit it, I've played the games before, but I just don't see how someone could want to do that. And we'll go back to another point that Professor Cole was speaking about and you brought up about how in high school classrooms they have one door. And in a lot of I believe every building except the academic forum, and I believe in DeFrancesco has a few two-doored classrooms. Some of them, you're teaching Lytle?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Lytle Hall is a bunch of really small classrooms with one door. And
that door doesn't lock.
It doesn't lock, and exactly.
Right.
And so if a gunman could easily just walk in and say that's just run amok in there, and there's no way to get out. And I remember in health class, they won over safety. They thought about with weapons, with guns in general. If a gunman walked in, a police officer said, "Here's what happens. All right, he's there. He's pointing it at you. Look at it. There's still hundreds of you. There's over 100. The academic forum is the largest academic classroom buildings on campus." And he said, what you do is you just come at him from different angles. If he has a gun, well, he won't get all of you. I'm like, oh. So, it's basically saying you say don't play a hero, yet when someone comes up, you say we should use our numbers. Where likely someone's going to get shot in that situation.
Steve, what if you have and Professor, you can deal with this too. I mean, what if you have a disgruntled student who didn't like the way you graded their work?
That's possible.
And they're carrying guns in school. I mean, we're not going to. The chances are slim that could happen. But because there are people who are unstable carrying guns and you're in a classroom, it's not only somebody breaking into the classroom, but it's also somebody within the classroom that could have the problem if we allow guns with students to be on campus. I mean, and plus the idea of the lack of two doors in the classroom. What if somebody's in there that's carrying a gun in the classroom and the kids have to try to get out? I mean, it's just we do things basically in an insane way. We're not using any logic to live in the world that we're living in today. A lot of people who run institutions and universities, they're living in the past. They think it's the 1950s or 1960s where people didn't, quote, do things like this. It's a totally different world now.
Yeah, it's evolved in a way, and there's a lot more weapons than ever. And and we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Please feel free to call in at 610-683-4859. That's 610-683-4859. Just to give you an update, this is KU Live. I'm your host, Steve Magiri. I'm here with WEEU. Nick Lawrence from Reading is here, and we have Professor Jeffrey Vicola here to speak about a piece he wrote on guns on why he doesn't want guns on our college campus after the mandate that was passed in, I believe, end of 2013. And I will take a quick commercial break, and we'll come back to speaking with Nick and Professor Vicola. Stay tuned for more KU Live. All right. I'm going to take a quick break. Would you mind staying tonight?
No, not at all.
Really good.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's Telescopic Topics, a look into the world above us.
Have you ever wondered how pictures of the sky at night are taken? I'm Tia Mahalanobis. Astrophotography is a type of photography which specifically focuses on recording images of celestial objects in the night sky. It is seen as an art for producing visually pleasing images and has more recently been used in scientific research as technology has advanced over the years. Both film and digital cameras are used in the procedure. Although the results of the images are rewarding to both the professional photographer and the astrophotography enthusiast, capturing the heavenly bodies at their loveliest is a challenging and lengthy task. What makes astrophotography exceptionally difficult is the recording of light and color in the images, which are also the most important things to capture in not just astrophotography, but any type of photography. After all, photography translates into drawing with light. To the naked eye, most stars appear to be white or have neutral tones, such as our sun. In reality, numerous other stars often embody hues ranging from blue to red, which are often washed out in pictures. Fortunately, star colors can be enhanced to their true form if the camera exposure is correctly used. An astrophotographer typically uses a very low ISO. The ISO controls the camera's sensitivity to light. A low ISO number is less sensitive to light, and a high ISO number poses a higher sensitivity to light. Also, the lower the ISO number is, the slower the shutter speed of the camera is. When using a high ISO, the shutter speed increases. The shutter speed is simply how long a camera shutter is open while taking a photograph. Although it would be easier to shoot stars with a high ISO, this setting, especially used in low light, can produce grainy images, which make important details hard to see. A low ISO makes for high dynamic range in the photograph, which means more details can be preserved, and as a result, a clearer picture will be composed.
Telescopic Topics, a look into the world above us. Stay tuned to KUR for more telescopic topics, and for more information, or to hear this segment again, click on the Telescopic Topics icon on the KUR website at www.kutztown.edu/KUR. Telescopic Topics is a production of the KU Physical Sciences Department and is recorded by KU astronomy students in the studios of KUR. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
KUR, the radio voice of Kutztown University, KUR Kutztown. Hey everyone, welcome back to KU Live. The time right now is about 2:45 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm your host, Steve Magiri, and we have a really good show centered around the talk of an issue that should have really been brought back into the fold about how guns on campus, people seem to just forgotten that it's still allowed and been regulated by the university. And we have, of course, the author of that article written on the Chronicle of Higher Education, Professor Jeffrey Vicola, an English professor here at the university, who's agreed to stay with us. And we also, to help us out, we have our friends at WEEU have allowed their very own Nick Lawrence to come speak with us. And We would love to hear your thoughts on this issue. So if you have a thought about the gun policy on campus, what's wrong with it? Do you think it's right, wrong? We'd love to hear from you, whether you're a student, faculty member, or just someone who lives in town or the area. Feel free to call in 610-683-4859. That's 610-683-4859. And now we'll just bring up to our next topic about the article in the beginning. And you talk, I'll paraphrase in a bit. You says, Professor Ficol writes, every morning as I head into my office at Kutztown University of Pennsylvania, I have to drive past 2 armored military vehicles armed in my direction. And he says the vehicles are, there's a National Guard armory with a battalion of tanks behind Lytle. And he says, they are a symbol for the armory, but he says he says that they create an unfortunate and unwelcoming entrance to campus. And I'll admit it, I drive up there when I go to class, I see a barrel of a tank pointed at my car. I'm not going to see that too often, but it's obviously, not fully functional. And it says that we're greeted with an image of violence and aggression as unsuitable for an academic setting. And then he ties that with guns, which I believe is a very valid point, because that just raises the question. The tanks, yes, that's a lot more violent because they're used specifically for offense. Defense at times, as usual, but a lot of people say guns can symbolize different things, and that's the question I really want to bring up is what do you think a weapon would really symbolize on campus? Do you think it symbolizes, someone protecting themselves? Some people view it as something to just use strictly for sport, for shooting going to the firing range, and some people use them for legit weapons. Some people don't look at them as weapons. What are your thoughts, Nick? What do you think that the media or people in general pursue guns as?
I mean, how do they see it, Steve?
Yes, how do they perceive it?
Well, I think they see it from every angle as each individual. Though some people see guns as a way of self-protection, and other people view guns, we use that term with fear. They're afraid of guns. They don't want to be around it in any way. But the concept is that it's there to defend oneself. It's not supposed to be an aggressive weapon. It's supposed to be a defensive weapon. Yet we know the person who's perpetrating the crime uses it as an aggressive weapon. So it has both aspects to it. It's a double-edged sword, I think. It is
a very double-edged sword. And a lot of people say that, I want to defend myself. But yet if you're walking or you bring a gun to campus to yourself, yes, you could say you're defending yourself, but it's also, couldn't you say like, oh, this person may be looking for trouble. Why do you need to, rely on using a weapon yourself that you may not be trained on? Like, what do you think, Professor Ficol? What do you think that the university body or just, yourself perceives a gun as?
I agree with what Nick's saying. I think that a lot of people see it as protection, and they see safety in having a gun. But we have to ask ourselves, where are we going to have these guns, and at what point do they infringe on other people's rights?
Where do you draw the line?
Where do you draw the line? At what point do other people feel less safe as a result of people carrying a gun? And especially when we talk in terms of a learning environment. To me, that's a place where there should be no weapons anywhere in that vicinity, because we're here for one reason, and that is to learn and to exchange ideas. And if we do need protection, we have campus police. And if we need more, then perhaps we should discuss that. But I understand people's beliefs in wanting to protect themselves. I do see a lot of people who have this vigilante attitude, though, that I strongly disagree with, where they feel, like we talked about earlier, that they could save the day, that you'd be happy if I carried a gun in class because I'd be protecting your life. But I'm not asking anyone to do that for me. I would much rather have an environment that bans all weapons than have someone try to protect me with a gun who is not trained to do that. Yeah,
exactly. Who may not be trained, because it's not just trigger safety. Index finger is the number one safety, but it's more than that. You need to know when to actually go to your gun. Police officers, they're trained they put them purposely in real life situations to say, what do you do? Is this a time when you reach for your weapon? And fight or flight comes in, and they're taught to almost combat that, to not always resort to that. Someone who's not been trained in law enforcement or anything, or even just some 18 to 22-year-old in general, they haven't been trained in that. When you get a gun, they don't say, all right, here's a textbook, here's a course you're taking. No, they just want you to say, all right, you're a licensed gun owner, here you go. It's just, I don't feel a university is the place for people to carry that. And believe me, in cities or other places like that, Maybe. I mean, but yeah, cities, yes, you should. But a university is specifically made for one reason. All those grounds are made for learning and, helping build your career. You're not going there to be a vigilante, as you said, and walking around with a gun around campus every day. It's not going to help you. And say if someone, what if it molds out through your shirt? You see like the molding of a gun. What people are going to think of you? They're not going to want to come up and talk to you. Think, oh, well, this person's in my class. I saw him once carrying a gun on campus. Say, if he's in this class, I have to keep away from him. It incites fear throughout everyone. So that's the question I'd like to pose for these last 10 minutes. What do you view a gun as? Do you view it as a symbol of defense, of offense? Do you believe it as a symbol of, almost like freedom or violence? Because guns account for so many deaths. Now, this is outdated. I wrote a speech about this, and I found the script for that. It was around 50-something thousand people were killed by gun accidents, and that's just accidents. I'm sure other shootings really increase that number, but just of accidents, that is way too many. And that's the question I'd like to pose to everyone, all of our listeners. And the number is 610-683-4859. That is 610-683-4859.
So, Steve, we have some historical perspective on everybody having guns. If we're to believe anything that showed up in some of our Western movies, in a day when everybody carried a gun, it was one of the most violent times in our history, and there was a reason that why we went away from that. Now, I wasn't around. Obviously, none of us was around.
Yeah, it's such an antiquated way of living,
right?
And that's why.
But so because people will say, if everybody had guns, then we'd be a much more safe society. No, we had the time in history, and that has passed. It was not a safe society. People could shoot you for any reason that they wanted to because they didn't like the way you walked or the way you looked or your philosophy about this or that term that we use today, as I used earlier. You disrespected me. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, it's an ambiguous language. A gentleman's disagreement could involve with someone being dead. I mean, that's just horrible. And Mike, I'll ask quickly our producer, Mike, you've been listening to this. As a faculty member, what do you think? Do you feel safe, with the possibility that some students maybe I believe we have
I'll take care of answering that call.
Yes, we'll hold that question off. So let's just see. Because that's what we were talking about is, I would love to talk to other faculty, too. Another professor I think we should maybe you could talk to. I could, introduce you to is Professor Leonard Barish of my electronic media department. He carries a weapon, but he's completely against having them here in academic circles. They don't fit at all into there. And I'd like to hear what our listener is. Oh, so Mike is okay, and that's right here, the number 9. Okay, so yes.
No, you're good. You don't have to do anything over there.
Hello? We have a caller in?
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for calling in. What's your name?
My name is Will. How are you?
Good. I'm Will. Thank you very much for calling in. I'm fine. How are you?
Good. So I hear we want guns on campus now.
Oh, I'm sorry. We want guns on campus.
Well, that's the topic of the day, right?
Right. It's the discussion being brought back into the light about whether we should or shouldn't. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that everybody should be given a gun when they register for classes. I think that this way, everyone will get exactly what they want out of the professors, and the dorms will be plenty of space in the dorms now that guns will be given to everybody. No more triple rooms in Berks and the whole nine. So I think this is a marvelous idea to have everybody.
I assume you're being.
gun.
I assume you're being sarcastic here.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. I mean that. Hey, believe me, that's a great tool. That shows that. Hey, that's exactly what we're talking about. Thank you very much, Jeff. And
yeah,
I'd like to, yes, and also just I would like to know: do you live in town? Are you a faculty member?
I'm an alumni.
Alumni.
So,
when did you graduate?
06.
06. Oh, wow. And so you live in the Lehigh Valley now, near Berks County? That's great. Yeah. So, and that's like you said, if the Wild West back then, weapons were, everyone had a gun. Simple looking at someone the wrong way would result in saying, all right, let's go out, 1, 2, 3, turn around and draw. That's what would happen to these little people, these idiots and the NRA that believe that everyone should have guns makes the world safer. No, it creates the Wild West, and then people are going to start using them to, like you say, a simple academic discussion. It's not about who has the bigger, the better argument. It's about who has the bigger stick. And that's just awful. And Mike, I'll also ask you about this. And Jeff, feel free to chime in. Do you think Mike is a faculty member here?
Actually, I'm staff.
I'm sorry,
yes,
staff.
Yeah.
Faculty, I mixed those two up.
That's
I apologize.
okay.
But is my producer. So as a staff here, what do you think? Do you feel a little nerve-wracked thinking that, hey, there may be possibly students with weapons on campus?
Well, it's funny because I think Nick brought up a good point before. You know, you have some people who, having guns on campus makes them feel safer. Other people, it makes them feel unsafer. I personally feel unsafer because I want guns to be in the hands of a professionally trained person, not somebody who, I mean, we have this whole mentality where, maybe I shouldn't stereotype all gun owners, but there's an awful lot of gun owners who I think they almost invite something bad to happen because they want to save the day. They want to be the person that's going to, be the hero. Well, I'm sorry. I would rather the hero be the trained police officer than some Joe who maybe received a couple courses on training and it's waiting for something to happen so that he can play hero. I mean, I personally don't feel safe.
We have a system where we do background checks, but we don't do mental health checks.
Exactly.
And I think that's the core of the issue is that we give everybody a gun, things are going to happen, and if people are allowed to have guns on college campus, when originally from Philadelphia, when you come from an area that's riddled with violence in the streets, college for me was a safe haven where you get away from all that. Now, of course, recent events and the like have happened, but I don't think that you should then invite. The solution is to add more guns and ammo into the situation. That's my personal opinion, just putting it out there.
Oh, yeah, you're feeding the fire. And Professor Vacola, what are your thoughts on this?
I agree with the caller. I think that it doesn't help the situation to just bring in more guns because for that very reason that people are not necessarily law enforcement, and having more guns increases the chances that one of those guns will be fired, and that's not a good situation. Right,
and another thing we say is that that law enforcement, they're trained to use this, and this is not just pistols or handguns. Also, with the law in Pennsylvania, you're 18 years old, you can get an assault rifle, so you can get an armor-piercing round. Yet, when you're 21, you can get a handgun. So that means you can get a rifle that should only be by the most highly trained, law enforcement or military. You can get that and keep that in your house. And like we brought up in the beginning of the show, there are ways to conceal that. There are compact versions of those assault rifles that are for sale on the market. They may not be full auto, but just that ammo is just so dangerous. And even with something like a sawed-off shotgun, there's so much ambiguous language in this because it says concealed carry. Where do we draw the line on that? What's concealed carry? You can, if you work at it, you can conceal any weapon. You can carry a bag. It's just really a mess. So, Jeff, I have to just ask, so what was your major? What did just curious, as an alum?
His name is Will.
Well, I actually had to run.
Yes. I apologize.
But, no, I actually had to run, but I appreciate it. It was computer science. And, but, with the amount of conflict there is in the dormitories and in the classrooms and things that I've seen, it's I don't think it's a good idea. But thanks, guys.
Yes,
and great
thank
show.
you very much for calling in. We really appreciate it. All right, well, thank you very much to Professor Jeffrey Vacola. The article on the Chronicle called "Why I Don't Want Guns in My Classroom." Please feel free to read it. We'll post it on our Facebook page. And once again, thank you again to Nick Lawrence of WEEU in Reading for coming on the show. Killer show. Great job by all of you. I'm your host, Steve Majiri. This is KU Live, signing off.